Sir, when you look at the Congress party, your family has been associated with the Congress party for 55 years now. And now I can see as a citizen that there are just countless things that are wrong with the Congress party. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Number one, India was flooded with a lot of scandals and scams. Number two, the party does not have a leader that I can look up to. Number three, the license Raj, like you mentioned, lasted for too long. And number four, the party in general did everything that, to me at least, looks like a very big mistake that compromised on the growth of the country. One example that I strongly believe in is the adoption of socialism. Singapore liberalized in the early 1970s. China liberalized in 1978. We saw socialism fail in China, after which they opened up their economy, and yet we opened up our economy in 1991 when we were just a few weeks away from bankruptcy. And another example of the same, where you mentioned the burden on the future, is the old pension scheme. So my question is, A, is it as bad as it looks like? B, if yes, why?
Look, analyzing the Congress or psychoanalyzing the Congress now is something I've moved away from.
Okay.
I've moved out of that party. I tried a lot to reform the party from within during its most challenging decade, from 2014 to 2024. I tried my best to, despite power, despite any prospect of power, stayed loyal to that party given my family's relationship. But at any point in life, regardless of which organization you work in, which profession you're in, whether you're a politician, whether you're a salaried employee working in a company, you can only do so much to go and tell the leadership that it's time to reform, it's time to improve. Beyond a point, if they don't value what you bring to the table, you have to move on. Otherwise, you're not able to contribute. And for me, when I entered politics in 2004, I was one of the youngest MPs at the time. I was 27 years of age. I always entered politics with a much higher purpose in life. For me, public service came before party. For me, India came before party. Loyalty to your country, loyalty to the public, to delivering public services has to come before political party. So now what is wrong with the Congress is something the Congress will have to get its act together. If the Congress loses this election, again, for the third time, I can only hope, and I can only say this through your channel, that I hope they provide India with at least a constructive opposition. Opposing anything for the sake of everything for the sake of opposing is not a constructive opposition. As a member of the Congress, there were many times in the last 10 years, I praised the Prime Minister for certain initiatives. I've seen certain things work on the ground. When the Prime Minister talked about Make in India as early as, I think, 2014 or 15, the criticism in the Congress was, it's never going to happen. India can't make it happen. It's happening. Today, the world has, and for many reasons, it's happening because India has got is getting its infrastructure story correct. It's happening because Government of India is giving production link incentive subsidies to companies to manufacture in India, to create jobs in India. It's also happening because after COVID, global investors have now a China +1 strategy.
Yeah.
They want to hedge their bets. They don't want to have their manufacturing bases only in China. I'm not saying they only want to come to India. They're also going to Bangladesh. They're also going to Vietnam. They're also going to other countries in this region. But India is certainly benefiting from that. But if India was not ready, if the Prime Minister had not made a clarion call to Make in India, if the Prime Minister had not laid out a plan to get the infrastructure ready, if the Prime Minister had not created a production link incentive, then when this opportunity came, this geopolitical opportunity came, we wouldn't be ready.
Yeah.
So, kudos to the Prime Minister for having the vision to do that, which frankly no Prime Minister or no government was thinking about. The view was that, India has moved to a services economy. We can't go back to manufacturing anymore. We can't compete with China. But things were changing. China was also, its per capita was increasing. China was no longer an efficient market to produce.
Yeah.
Countries like Vietnam, who had a lower per capita income, were taking a lion's share of manufacturing away. Today now, under the Prime Minister's leadership, the biggest mobile manufacturing plant in the world is in India, just a few kilometers away from Delhi. Samsung has brought it there. So, So one of the problems with the Congress was, and I believe that the Congress did good things for India. Yes, you can argue was the economic reform process brought in a decade, 2 decades later than say China? Yes, it was. I'm willing to concede. In fact, my father was one of the earliest advocates that we must have economic reforms in the late 70s and early 80s.
Wow.
In the late 70s, early 80s, he believed we have to open up our private sector. We have to allow our private sector to flourish. We may not have come of age in every sector, but we must allow that to flourish.
Then why didn't they allow that?
Again, there are many reasons for that, but now there's no point going into what happened. But I think the Congress was, to be fair, there was also a time where India was not sure about economic reforms. And this was across the political spectrum. To be fair, whether you were on the left or you were on the right, across the spectrum, there was broad consensus that we don't want too much of economic reforms.
Okay.
Because
sir, I'll tell you why
91 was a turning point, not because the government wanted to proactively do it, but they had to do it reactively.
Correct.
Because the country's finances were in a devastating situation. But yes, had India opened up its economy, had it liberalized its economy in the 80s, in the 70s even, we would have had great opportunities. We would have been at par with China. Our per capita would have been at par with China today. Did we miss out? Yes. In fact, we also did a few more aggressive things. We nationalized at some points. We also nationalized banks. We also nationalized textile companies, which made the country's private sector a little more inefficient. Set it back by a decade or so.
Hi guys, thank you so much for watching the Indian Business Podcast. If you find value in our work, please hit that subscribe button, because for you it might be a zero effort task, but for us that subscriber count is an important instrument to get great guests to our podcast and to make this podcast better for you. So if you find value, please subscribe.